70 years of Queen Elizabeth, and you've knew her so well. Tell us something personal, interesting about your relationship with her.
Well, you know, I grew up with the Queen, and when I first met her as Prime Minister, she said to me, "You're my 10th Prime Minister. The first one was Winston Churchill. That was before you were born." So, you know, I realized you were always talking with someone who this vast historical experience. She was very gracious and actually kind, very empathetic towards her prime ministers. She knew the burden of responsibility you carried, and she was conscious of that and always helpful. I couldn't really tell you what her politics were. She was always above, the politics, but she had this intense commitment to duty. I mean, it really was her driving force, and those characteristics of sort of dignity, duty, decency, they defined her, and I think they gave her this power of example, if you like, and she was just such a constant feature of British life through all the changes. I mean, if you go back to the 1950s, look at 1950s Britain, just go and watch the films of the coronation and just see the faces. Then you go fast forward to Britain 2022 and the huge difference in social makeup, in class, in society, in the way we live, work, think, everything. And she managed to guide the monarchy through all of that. So she was a remarkable person. We used to meet every week, obviously when I was Prime Minister. And then I was actually with her about 3 months ago. We had lunch together when she bestowed this honor on me called the Knight of the Garter.
I remember that. You have to dress up for that, really.
Well, it was instigated in 1340, and
it seems like the outfits haven't changed very much.
No, well, that's right. So you have to, if you want to see a really ridiculous picture of me, you can Google it and see that. But she was ungrateful. She was very reflective, and she had a. It seems an odd thing to say about a monarch, but she was actually very streetwise. She kept her pulse firmly on where the British people were.
In 2022, for some, the monarchy feels like an anachronism. It is very different from the 50s in lots of ways. I mean, the Labour Party in Australia today is a Republican party. Do you feel like there have to be changes in the monarchy?
Well, I think King Charles will instigate certain changes, I think, probably, or so I read. I mean, I don't know, but look, in the end, my generation, which was, as it were, the first generation that grew up in a society really doesn't have the same deference, didn't have the same attachment to class as traditional British society. We've come to our own settlement in our own minds of this issue, if you like, which is, you can have an elected president or you can have a monarch, and we prefer that, the tradition of the monarch, someone who's above politics. It gives you a certain point of unity as a country, even if your politics is quite divided, which ours has been, like yours in the past few years. And so, we've come to not a kind of, not an historical or a traditional decision to keep the monarchy. We've come to what is a rational decision that we prefer it to the alternative system. And so I think provided, and I'm sure this will happen with King Charles, by the way, because he's a decent and caring guy. I think if the monarchy keeps to this principle of duty to the country first, service to the country first, I think it's reasonably well, supported in British society. As
a unifying factor for the country.
Yeah, as a unifying factor. And, Western politics is pretty ugly and has been for several years. But, with the Queen's passing, I mean, even people I knew who were Republicans were moved by it and respected her and supported her. And I think, Prince Charles, as he was then, was, for example, on issues like the environment, on better relationships between the faiths, was well ahead of his time. The royal family, because of the Commonwealth and the number of African countries within the Commonwealth, they were very, very, it's very ingrained in the monarchy, this head of the Commonwealth, the concept of that. So look, who knows, but I think it's, for the moment, I would say the monarchy is pretty safe.